The following program is presented by the Metropolitan Library Service Agency.
Hello, welcome to All About Kids, a program focusing on the interests of children and young people and some of the issues affecting them. Our guest today, author Richard Eyre, has written several parenting books with his wife, Linda. Today, he's accompanied by his daughter, Saydi, and they'll be talking about the latest book, 3 Steps to a Strong Family. Richard and Saydi Eyre will be interviewed by Terry Haugen-Sjostrom, a social worker with the Judson Family Center.
Well, welcome and hello to Richard and Saydi. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Terry.
Yeah.
It's our pleasure to be in Minneapolis.
Good. And I think it's so wonderful to have you both here because you both participated in writing the most recent book, which is...
3 Steps to a Strong Family.
Right.
This one here.
That one.
And, you know, as far as we know, Terry, it really is the first parenting book that actually has children writing part of it,
Well,
which
I
is kind
think
of
that's
interesting when you
great.
think of it, because the kids are what we're writing about, right? Plus, we had to make a pact with them that we would not edit or change anything that they wrote, even the spelling.
I
We didn't put
noticed.
the spelling
Yes,
in.
I noticed. Was it fun, Saydi?
Yeah, it was fun.
Now, how long ago do you remember writing and participating in your parents putting together this book? When was that?
Just last year, actually.
Okay,
It's
so it's just
I
very
wrote
recent
while
then.
I was away at college. I wrote and sent things home to them.
That's great. It wasn't your spelling that I noticed, by the way. I think it must have been one of the younger
youngest
children.
sister, yeah.
Right.
She's
great.
never been intimidated, little Charity. She's 7 years old now, but even when she was 4, she was writing things. Most kids say, how do you spell something? She just didn't
Figure it
bother.
out.
She said, I can spell this. I mean, why should I follow rules? Unfortunately, that's a little trait that runs all through her personality.
Well, she sounds wonderful. You know, I think what you present in the book is very intriguing, but your family and your own lives are intriguing too. And I want to tell you a story, what happened at my house last night as I was preparing for this and looking at your materials. I had your book, and it was on the couch, and my 11-year-old came up and said, well, what are you doing and what's going on? And I told him a little bit about today's events, and he picked up the cover and looked at the photo on the back. And for those of you who can't see, on the back of the book cover is a nice photo of the entire family. However,
9 children.
9 children, all perched on the hugest limb of the hugest tree I've ever seen. So the question that I have to answer for my family and myself and my son is, how did you get on the limb? Did you use a ladder
I wonder if
or
they
a cherry picker?
I don't know if it'd pick up. It's a pretty small
Yeah.
photo. It probably wouldn't, but there we all are. And this was a big sycamore tree, and it was a very high limb. What you can't tell is it was about 10 or 12 feet in the air, and we were worried that one of the kids would fall off and sort of pull all the others around on the bottom of the limb like little possums hanging there. But that was actually a picture we took for a Christmas card. We had no idea that it would ever end up on a book. But you know, one reason all the kids participated in writing, Terry, is because we think a lot of parents are like we are. They're sick to death of sort of psychobabble, behavioral advice from parenting experts, quote unquote, which usually sends you on a guilt trip. I mean, it usually makes you think, oh my word, now I thought I was a bad parent, now I know I am, you know,
Now
I
I know I'm
don't
inadequate.
understand all this. And it's like, sometimes parents almost feel that unless they have a graduate degree in behavioral science, they're not qualified to be a parent. And I think that's a big problem today. What we wanted to do in this book was get right to the bedrock basics. What do you do if you want to keep your family together? How do you preserve a family? How do you make it into an institution? And it occurred to us that every institution, from a country to a school to a fraternity, if it's going to last, it's got to have 3 things. It's got to have a legal system, some kind of a set of rules, otherwise there's anarchy. You got to have an economy to motivate people and get people to do their share and be self-reliant. And you have to have some traditions. If you don't have traditions, there's no glue holding that family together. So really, we think it's the most basic parenting book ever written. We think it gets down to the 3 things you've got to do
And
if you want
those
your
are
family to stay
the legal
together.
system,
Right.
the economic system,
Right.
and the traditions.
Exactly.
The traditions.
And we've had so much fun with all three of those in our family. I mean, the book is about our family.
It's fun to read.
Yeah.
It is about your family, and it does. Meeting you here is fun because it fleshes out some of what I came to learn as I read it. I think the traditions part for me is so exciting because those are some of the things I think that time and lack of energy are eroding for all of us. I certainly feel that in my life. And I talk to other parents all the time that feel such pressure and feel such angst about how can I do what's most important in my life and still work because I need to do this. Both parents in many families need to work, and there's such a dearth of resources or energy or sometimes even hope. Do you hear that from parents too?
And a lot of parents say, oh, I wish I had time for some of these traditions. I'm just too busy. And what we try to point out is you better find time because in a way they buy you time. In other words, they keep your family together for a longer time. And once you establish family traditions, the kids will not let you ever forget them. I mean, they become so important.
We have a tradition for his birthday. We always go and jump in leaves.
I take it you have a fall birthday.
And this year on his birthday, he got there's 4 of us away from home, and we all sent him home leaves from when we went and jumped in the leaves
independently of each other. None of them. I got these 4 birthday cards from my 4 older children. Every one of them had a leaf, and one was from Romania, by the way, where Saydi's sister is. Dad, here is a leaf from Romania. I raked a big pile and jumped in it in honor of your birthday. I mean, see, traditions are like, you know, I think it's the reason kids join gangs today is because their family no longer is a permanent entity from which they can gain identity. And so they look for identity elsewhere and they end up in a gang or something. So traditions are not, they're fun, they're wonderful things to do, but they have a purpose. And the purpose is holding you together.
And that identity. And then about the legal system, the rules of the family. You know, for a long time, in the days of Dr. Spock, which we were talking about earlier, things were very rigid and there were rules, and then things were looser. And what are you suggesting with this legal view of how the family should operate?
You state that in an interesting way, Terry. I think the danger is to be too loose or too tight. The parents we see who've lost their children are one or the other. I mean, really lost them. You know, they're either parents that had no rules. When kids have no rules, what do they feel? Insecurity. They're pushing that envelope. Where's the limit here, you see?
Do they care enough about me to push back?
A lot of my friends, like, they either have their parents are so strict that they can't do anything. They always have to worry about things, or they're so lenient that they kind of brag about, you know, I don't have a curfew or whatever, but you can tell inside they're kind of lost, or they're kind of wishing that, like, feeling they're uncared about, sort of.
The other thing you have to do, Terry, is you got to get them simple. I remember in our family when we first decided to have this little meeting and set up the family rules, you see, and I think Saydi was a baby at the time, and her older sisters and brother were nominating, they were writing them on a chart. We ended up with about 35 rules, you know. And a little later, the oldest, Saydi's oldest sister, came to me and said, Dad, you know, even the Bible only has 10. Could we simplify that? I mean, no one could remember them. It was just silly. And what we recommend in the book is 5, just 5 very simple laws, and they're all one word: peace, respect, asking, order, and obedience. And all 5, the kids know what they are. They know what let me just give you one example of peace. You don't fight in the home. If you do, what's the penalty? A little bench. We actually got ours out of a church. It's a very uncomfortable little pew. It's called the fighting bench. If you're fighting, you got to go sit there. And the only way you can get off the bench is to think hard enough, which is very hard for little children, to figure out what you did wrong, not what the other kid did wrong. I mean, they already know that. They want to tell you what this kid, what did you do? And they have to think, I didn't do anything. Oh, no, it takes 2 to tangle. What did you do? Oh, no, thinking. Sometimes they'll even ask the other kid to know what they did wrong so they can say what it is so they get off the bench. And then they have to apologize to each other and give each other a little hug, and then they can leave. Now, compare that with what we usually do in families. The parent is the judge and the jury and the Gestapo and trying to figure out who was right and who was wrong and what punishment. And you go crazy. You can drive yourself crazy with that.
It's tough being the enforcer.
Yeah, so basically all the laws are designed, and parents will be glad to hear this because we're all time conscious, they're designed to save you time. They're designed to turn initiative over to children where they can begin to work out their own problems.
That's great. That's great. All this is really...
You've spent a little time on the bench, by the way.
Well, all of us adults could spend time on the bench trying to figure out our role in some of the difficulties in life that we have ourselves as well.
Right.
But all this is kind of about values, about teaching children values. And all that makes sense in my head and is very important, but the dailiness of it is difficult.
That's why we wanted to get it down to 3 steps, Terry, because a lot of times, you know, our last book was a national bestseller, and it was called Teaching Your Children Values, but it had 12 values, and some parents would come and say, please, I can't remember 12 things, it's too complicated, you know. And this book, in a way, is a response to that. It's saying, look, if you do these 3 things, I mean,
your basic
think
bedrock.
about it. For example, think about the economy, which is a way to help kids earn their own money and buy their own clothes and so on. Is it really about money, though? No, it's about self-reliance. It's about discipline. It's about delayed gratification. See, you teach values, responsibility, honesty. You know, all the values you're trying to teach are actually part of these 3 steps.
Hard lessons when it's kind of a I want kind of culture, and everything looks very attractive.
Right.
It's very hard.
Yeah,
very hard to come back to base on those things.
I think the economy, Saydi's probably better qualified to talk about this, but in a way it's the radical part of the book, because so many parents just give their kids an allowance. It's sort of the accepted norm, and they say, well, this is good because the kids are learning to handle money. But what else are they learning? Well, they're kind of learning something for nothing. They're kind of learning a welfare system. They're learning to be demanding. Dad, give me my money. You know, it's Saturday. We set up a system instead where from the time they're 7 or 8 years old, they have to do certain things around the house, and how many of those assignments they get done determines on Saturday, which is payday rather than allowance day, how much they get. And one kid might get $15 and the other kid might get 20 cents. But that's proportionate to how well they did. And then they take the money they've earned and they go out and buy their own clothes. Parents say, oh, I could never afford that. Well, it's the same money you would have bought clothes with them. You're just funneling it through the child. And Saydi had, I don't want to embarrass, but Saydi was probably the one that took the longest to be really responsible in her purchase decisions.
Are these clothing decisions?
We started buying our own clothes when we were 8 years old, and so I made some really stupid choices, but it was a lot better to learn that when I was 8 rather than when I was 18, when things would really matter. I mean, I went out and bought some Guess overalls for a lot of money, and I wanted to return them, but I realized, you know, I understood what money was when I was young. So.
Yeah. Purchasing decisions are important ones.
I remember the other thing that amazed us when we first started on that, and again, it sounds complicated, but it's very simple, this economy. All you're doing is you're saying to kids, look, certain things we have to do in our home, a certain amount of money comes into our home. If you do part of the work, you get part of the money. So they're earning, and it's so simple, because now they have their own money and they buy their own clothes, and guess what they'll start doing with those clothes? It's amazing. They'll start hanging them up because they know that they cost X number of dollars. They had to buy them. They have value. Now they'll hang them up. Sometimes. Not all the time.
Not always. Not always. Well, this is interesting. Now, I have a question about joy.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about 2 of your, well, we have 2 books here, but there are 3 books we've talked about, and one of them is called Teaching Your Children Joy.
Right.
And I enjoyed looking at that, and I looked at that and thought what you were saying had something like joy kind of translated into how you engage in the world, how you get stimulated, how you feel competent. And that felt like some self-esteem things to me too. Is that what you were saying?
It really is. Joy is a synonym in our definition for feeling good about yourself. And this is a book which is I think that, in fact, that's it. This is the new edition of it, Teaching Your Children Joy. And this is a book that was written originally in the 80s. And it was written in response, and has now been revised in this new edition, but it was written in response to our own situation where we were sending our kids to preschool, and the preschools were like little academic, pushy little factories. I mean, they were saying, I saved one little circular that said, send your child to our school, we guarantee she'll read by the time she's 3 years old, or you know, you play the violin when you're 2, or you do square roots when you're 4. And our feeling was, no, you need a childhood. Kids deserve a childhood. Well, what is a childhood? Well, it's a time of wonder. It's a time of enjoying the world in their body and figuring out who they are. So for us, joy is the social and emotional joys of imagination, of creativity, of being able to set a little goal and accomplish it, little joyful things, rather than the heavy-handed, pushy, you're an extension of my ego, so I want you to be the top kid on the block. That's a big mistake that parents make.
But we try out of love to do the best we can, and we want our children to be successful.
Yeah. But see, joy is success. That's the whole key. Success is not how early you do something or how far ahead you are academically. Success is, do you feel good about yourself? And by the way, I have to say, it was not long after Saydi's middle name is Joy, Saydi Joy,
Nice.
and she came along about the time we were thinking these thoughts, and she's become a pretty good product of this.
Well,
as you can tell by this smile.
Yes. And there was a Joy School.
Oh yeah, there are over 1,000 Joy Schools
Really?
all over the country now that were spawned by this book, and they're for preschoolers, and little 3- and 4-year-olds go there, and they have a unit on the joy of imagination, the joy of sharing and service, the joy of creativity, and that's their curriculum. That's actually what they learn, and the goal is to send them to kindergarten as happy kids. Strange as that might sound.
Sounds wonderful. It sounds really wonderful. So besides the books, there's a school that has
Right.
come along with this. And the piece that most interests me is kind of a selfish piece, because I'm a parent, and it's about how hard it is to be a parent.
Yeah,
So I'm going, so where's the joy for parents?
yeah.
And how can you help parents? I know that my biggest job is to help my children to grow and to be all that they can
Right.
be. And I want to do that, but it's very hard for me to do.
Right,
And so I'm thinking about this organization called Homebase.
right.
What is that?
Well, it's quite an amazing organization in that it has grown up spontaneously without, we live in a world where most things are heavily promoted and advertised. And the Homebase organization has grown by word of mouth. There's now about 50,000 parents throughout the world that belong to Homebase. They get a newsletter every month, and the newsletter is on balancing your work and your family. In other words, how do you meet this incredible dilemma of the 90s of going to work every day, coming home and having children there waiting for you, and dealing with all this and trying to put it all together. And Homebase, it doesn't have all the answers, but at least it links up 50,000 parents who are struggling with those same challenges.
So it takes away some of the isolation and at least
Exactly,
names and
yeah.
lifts up the issue.
Right.
So you can be more forward on your brain.
Right.
not
I should
lost.
probably mention a phone number if you don't mind. If people want to get this newsletter, all they have to do is call 801. Now that's not an 800 number, because again, this is a co-op. We don't have any free anything. I
Right.
mean, everything, we all share the cost. 801-581-0112.
Okay.
And they'll send you a newsletter, and you're a member. You're linked in. You're hooked up.
Well, great. I think for me, the best thing I can do for my children and for the families that I work with is help the parents some way feel good about what they're doing.
Right.
Have a roadmap, have supports around them, feel competent.
Right.
You know, and those are real. So what you've talked about, some real important kind of resources.
Yeah, we
for
call it
people in that
life
way.
balance.
Life balance. I think being isolated and being fearful that you're not doing a good enough job is so paralyzing and so difficult for people.
Parenting is a lonely business, and this whole thing of what goes on in their homes is lonely. We talk to so many parents who say, you know, until I got involved in Homebase, I thought I was the only one. And then I saw, oh, other people have these same worries. It's not that suddenly my problems were over, but at least I didn't feel so alone, so isolated. You know, when you go to the hospital and have a baby, it's funny when you think about it. It's funny, but it's not funny. They give you this little pink bundle, and there's no owner's manual. There's no instruction book, and you take it home, and and the funny thing is, polls tell us that 90-some-odd% of us think that our highest priority in life is our children and our families, and yet our mental energy is really spent in other ways, and sometimes families get the leftover time. And our whole mission, if you will, in life is to try to sort of popularize parenting and essentially say, guess what? It's not only an obligation, it's a lot of fun. And if you don't have fun at it, you're probably not doing
You're
a good
missing
job
half
at
of
it.
it,
And
yeah.
you're missing half of it. Yeah,
that's
exactly.
great. Well, so there's the joy of parenting.
Yeah.
But you also talked about parenting in another way which interested me, and that was parenting by objective.
Yeah.
It was sort of a little MBA approach.
Yeah.
I certainly know what management by objective is, but parenting by objective made it real concrete for me. It made it real directed and real focused, like I knew where I was going.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that?
Well, you see, at the time we first started doing this writing, I was a Harvard MBA, and I was, you know, out practicing management consulting. And it always amazed me that when a businessman would come in my office, and I'd say, "What are your objectives and your goals?" They could usually tell you, "Well, I want to make this, I want to do this, here's my production goal," and they could tell you. But when you'd say to them or to someone else, "Well, what are your goals as a parent?" They would say, "My goals? What do you mean?"
Just to get through one more day.
Yeah,
beyond that.
what are your goals with your children?
Yeah.
Well, I raise my kids, I guess. That's my goal. I mean, nothing specific, see? So what we've tried to say is, okay, here's these books. Teach your children joy. That's a goal. Here's a curriculum to do it. Teach your children responsibility was our second book. Here it is. Teach values. Here's a third book. Now, you take those books and you've got a goal each month. One particular thing to teach every month. And then you can focus on it. And then along came 3 Steps, and Saydi and the other kids wrote their part, and we think it's sort of the capstone book. I don't know that we'll write another parenting book, because I think that 3 Steps basically says these are the things you do to have parenting by objective.
Well, it's a real concrete and a real helpful way, I think, to pedal back and think, okay, now what really am I about? I know from my experience is similar to what you just described. It's most of my mental energy seems to be invested in things away from home.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where my job is, and my title, and where I use my education to some extent, and where I get my salary.
Yeah, yeah.
And somehow upending that and bringing that energy back home while I'm still making a living is a difficult balance. And I think that's the thing that interested me about your book, and just the sharedness of the conversation.
Well, I think Saydi found that at Wellesley. She was a freshman there this year. Didn't you find that the whole orientation of the next generation too is career? What are you going to do? What's going to be your identity in life as defined by a career? I don't know, you might want to say that. I mean, there's more of that than there is talking about what kind of family are you going to have.
Much more, I found.
Yeah. Well, I feel that too, and as much as I enjoy my career and things like that, I'm always struggle to maintain the balance and to find the flow and to do that. And the best help for me, I guess, is talking with you and talking with other parents. It helps keep me focused so I don't get too unbalanced.
Right. Right.
And so, as you were talking about building healthy families, all those things are really helpful to me. But my self-interest for me is my children, which means if they're going to learn values, they're going to learn them from watching me.
Right, right.
And I'm scared sometimes for what they're seeing in the rush and the hurry and the lack of time to be together.
Yeah, exactly.
That concerns me.
Well, and you don't have much help today as a parent. The media is not going to help you teach values to your children.
Yeah.
The peer group is not going to help you teach values to your children. More and more the schools aren't going to help you, right? I mean, I was talking to a parent the other day who lived in Montana, of all places, and she was saying that her daughter was in middle school, 7th grader, got a little Valentine in the mail last Valentine's Day from the principal of this public school. Cute little verse about safe sex and a condom enclosed in the Valentine's. 7th grade, from the public school, from the principal. I'm sure well-meaning, you see, but what value does it teach? And I mean, maybe that's fine with you as a parent, but maybe it isn't. And what if you don't feel that way? In other words, what I'm saying is, the buck stops here. You're the parent. You teach the values. If you don't, no one will.
They're just absorbed from the culture around them.
Yeah, the vacuum. There's a vacuum there, and they'll suck it in from the media, heaven forbid, or from other sources. Yeah.
Well, I know it seems like the 90s is a conversation about values, and is a conversation about families and how important they are, but saying that and doing it appear to be very different things, and they're very difficult. So it's really helpful for me to be having this conversation with you and to hear from you your ideas.
What do you think, Saydi, as far looking back, what is the thing that made our family permanent as so far? I mean, so far we're together. What do you think's kept us together?
I think the traditions and the system that we've had in our family, it made it kind of hard to go away because I missed it so much. It was so much fun, and I loved it so much, and it just really, I love being with my family. It's my favorite thing because of all the traditions we have and all the systems we have and stuff, and they got a little bit monotonous, all the family meetings and stuff, but they really paid off. It really works.
That's great.
We still do have a family meeting every Sunday, and we find, you know, you can get unrealistic. You say, I'd love to have my family together every night for dinner. I doubt it's going to happen in today's world, but so you be realistic. You say maybe every Sunday, you know, we can get together, we can actually have dinner together, we can sit around the table, we can communicate. A lot of traditions have grown around that in our family. We go around the table now, and each person takes just a minute to say how he feels. The key word is feelings. And he might start off with some positive feelings. I love my sister and here and that. But then he might get into some things that bother him, you know, and kids need that. They need a way to let out their feelings and share what's really inside of them. And if you provide them an opportunity, kids are remarkably conversant. I mean, they can really express feelings. Too often we never get to that, though. It's all see, too many of us get home and we think that the essence of parenting is to be a disciplinarian, be sure kids do the right thing. Have you had a problem today? I mean, and a lot of parenting books are written that way. They say, if Johnny does this, you do this. If you have this problem, here is the answer. I don't think that's what parenting is. I don't think it's a case of reacting. I think it's a case of, can you build a household that stays together? Is there communication there? Do people respect each other? Are there rules? Are there values taught there, you see? And we need to have an offense. It's the old saying, an offense is the best defense.
Yes.
If you have a system and a home that works, you're not going to avoid all problems, but you will avoid many of them because the things are happening that you want to have happen.
Well, Richard and Saydi Eyre, you're here to talk to us about parenting in your family and how it worked. And it seems that what I've heard today is life's best lessons are learned at home, and that it can be done.
It can be done.
It can be done. Parents and families and children and people who love those children can all do it together.
We want parents to feel empowered, not intimidated.
Great. Wonderful talking to you.
Thanks
you so much.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Three Steps to a Strong Family, published by Simon & Schuster, offers practical advice for parents. Thank you, Richard and Saydi Eyre, and thank you, Terry Haugen-Sjostrom. Thanks to all of you for joining us on All About Kids. Please tune in again.
This has been a presentation of Hennepin County Library in conjunction with the Twin Cities Metropolitan Library Service Agency. We thank you for watching, and we hope you visit your public library often.